Welcome to the Sharing the Faith podcast, where every other week we explore the beauty and power of faith in Jesus Christ, the light of the world. Now here is your host, Dr. Tom Neal.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Tom Neal here again with another episode of Sharing the Faith. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, it's always a pleasure to be with you. And today, as is almost always the case, I have the pleasure of being with a guest that I can extract some insights and wisdom from through conversation. And today I'm having back my dear colleague, Dr. Christopher Gawel. So Dr. Christopher Gawel is our director of liturgy and sacramental practice in the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. And Christopher, it's great to have you back here.
Great to be back.
Yes.
Loving this.
Same here. We had a great conversation last time about Gen Z and the religiosity of Gen Z, kind of what characterizes their unique approach to religion and how the church or parents or anyone who engages Gen Z might understand them better and relate to them more effectively in terms of faith. And last time we didn't get to the part which I was actually looking forward to the most, which was from your dissertation, which was on Gen Z, which was on the 5 characteristics of the religiosity of Gen Z, which comes from Christian Smith's 5 characteristics of
Millennials.
That's right. So we're going to kind of extrapolate from that and dig into this question here about understanding the generation of the millennials and of Gen Z. And so what I thought we'd do is dive into each of these 5 characteristics and see what insights we might gain from them. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to take each of these 5 and I'm going to ask you just to riff on them, comment on them, and we'll go back and forth. And they're fascinating. So the first one is actually, I find, one of the most compelling ones, which is what a friend of mine who works in this area calls the conflict model of faith and science, which is that faith and science are inherently incompatible. There's this sense among that generation that that's the case. It's almost a default position. So because of that, and because there's no scientific proof or empirical evidence for God or any of the truths of faith, therefore I can't believe it. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, so first thing I want to clarify is these are the 5 conclusions I came up with in my research and study.
Based on...
Yeah, so I used Christian Smith's model that he used for the religiosity of millennials, and I said I'm going to come up with 5 of my own. As it was a surprise byproduct of my work, but I said I can narrow it down to these 5. But yeah, that faith and science are incompatible. If you remember the last time we talked, I talked about Gen Z being very practical.
Yes,
and so when they look at the world, they're not looking to be CEOs of companies. They want a job that will give them a comfortable life. So the practical aspect of religiosity is if there's no real scientific proof of faith or the need for faith, therefore, and of God, therefore, science can't demonstrate faith or God, therefore doesn't exist.
Right.
It doesn't need to fall into my purview because they're incompatible. And what I always like to work with my students was science will be able to answer the questions of what and how. And I think Bishop Barron is the one that dives into this, explaining it this way. But faith is going to ask the questions who and why. Science can't answer who and why. And faith, in a sense, really can't answer what and how.
Yeah, sure.
So that's why we need, what I think back to is John Paul II when he wrote Fides et Ratio as faith and reason being the 2 wings of a dove, lifting up truth, or,
Sure.
That's where I kind of, I now understand this. And so when we're preaching, when we're teaching, when we're in dialogue with somebody, especially Gen Z, and they have this characteristic of religiosity, science and faith are incompatible, we're going to have to really come up with some really good arguments or come up with some information. And I think just by stating which questions science answers and which questions faith answer, I think is a great start to a dialogue to evangelize Gen Z.
No, that's a great point, because if you think that the what and how is going to be answered by the Bible or by faith, and you don't find that, then you're going to be frustrated to not realize that's not actually what questions that faith addresses. No, that's excellent. And I think, you mentioned Bishop Barron. Of course, a lot of Bishop Barron's target audience is the nuns, the NONES, which would be the millennials and now the rising Gen Zs who fit this model here, and how much emphasis he places on that. So in catechesis, for example, just catechizing or preaching, et cetera, what do you think that looks like in practice?
So one thing that I want to also point out too is with millennials, there was this idea that there was a hope with millennials because there was a spiritual but not religious. And that's something that we could work with.
Sure.
Well, I would just want to make the point that with Gen Z, it's not spiritual, not religious. So I think one of the areas that I found very effective is to take a look at where does faith help our lives? And one of the things that is so prevalent amongst young people is mental health. And it seems counterintuitive because so many people would associate religiosity with guilt, with feeling sorry for oneself, with an admission of sin and basically where I've done wrong and where I'm inadequate. And so, but what the experts have been saying with faith, Jonathan Haidt, for example, Anxious Generation, talks about the value of religiosity, the value of practicing your faith, because it brings things like ritual, it brings things like purpose out of oneself, and it comes from something unconditional. And so being able to convince some people that aren't convinced about faith and aren't convinced about religion, I talk about what is the good that it brings to a person. And the studies are now coming out. Children, young adults who practice their faith regularly have greater mental health. And I think because that's such an important topic for them, the more evidence we can show people,
that's good. Yes.
That's the science
sure
that faith is of value to people. And Jonathan Haidt, surprisingly enough, says in The Anxious Generation, he's an agnostic Jew, and yet he favors the practice of religion. He favors a life of faith because of some of the benefits that it provides for us, even for a sense of mental health and self-awareness.
Excellent. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I like that way of extending science out into that realm of mental health, which even touches a whole nother area of this younger generation's interest in well-being and wholeness, life-work balance, those kinds of things that you and I have talked about a lot. Okay, next point would be the question of identity, which I've always heard is really kind of a critical issue here. Where does the millennial generation, Gen Z, but in this case millennials, where do they secure their idea or their conception of their own identity, and how does that relate to faith?
Yeah, so the second point that I made was one's identity is secured by ideas and traits, especially in the relationships that it formed. So if someone attacks that idea or trait, they therefore attack the person.
I see.
And so we've moved, we have generations now, we have young people who words are hostile or violent.
Right.
Where somebody who is preaching or teaching catechesis on the morality of the church, for example, and they hit one of the controversial topics, and the preacher, the priest or the bishop or the professor at the seminary or the catechist is talking about an issue, if a person in the audience has identified with that issue, say it's gender or race or a particular sin, they're now seeing it as a personal attack on their identity. And I think the one area that where a misplaced identity has really occurred, and I think I've said this before, is relationships. And what I found in teaching college students was how many of the students were responding out of the identity of their parents. I think I mentioned in our last podcast that there's a misplaced identity of parents and their children. Their self-worth, their values come from, or their self-worth and value come from the perceived success of their children. And they will, wipe anything away that will detach from that.
Sure.
And what I'm finding now is these young people in college are not living their own dreams. they're living the dreams of their parents, mainly probably because their parents are paying for college and their parents are putting a lot of pressure on them to get a certain degree or go in this particular field. And so that I had to be very careful when interacting with young people about their relationship with their parents, because explicitly or implicitly, they understood that another person's value was based on how they performed. And I just see this. So why we have now idolized sports. I think that is an area. I think a lot of parents want to see their child succeed athletically, because maybe they themselves couldn't way back when, or maybe because you're seeing the proliferation of sports in Division III colleges where intramurals used to be the norm, and now it's they're all getting football teams, and they all have track and cross country and dance and all these teams, and people are now choosing those schools because of sports, and you'd have to sit there and go, well, what's the impetus behind these sports? We in the church try to minister and say, let's get rid of sports on Sundays. I come from the diocese where the Archbishop made sure that no Catholic school had any activities on Sundays.
Sure. Same in New Orleans.
Well, they were finding club teams. They were still finding
ways around it.
There was a club team that emerged that rented the field from the Catholic school on a Sunday, and we still saw our students, our children from the parish on that sports field rather than being in church at Mass on Sunday. So I think that's a key aspect, this idolization of sports or of activities. And we sit there and we go, how do we address? I don't think I've seen anybody really address. I think they address the symptoms of it, but not that underlying foundation of what's going on here, which is that sense of identity.
Sure.
And then to translate that into identity from an unconditional, loving God who's transcendent, who will never fail us, who will never abandon us.
Yes.
And then as Catholics, the other added impetus here is because of the Eucharist. We have a God who then we can consume. We have a God who is so personal that we're allowed to eat his body and drink his blood.
That's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. I do. That idea of identity and the over-tying of identity with success in that sense, success defined by sports or grades or whatever kinds of things you're talking about, living the dreams of your parents out. And people, when people call into question your ideas, so they criticize your ideas, or they question your ideas, or they evaluate your ideas, and therefore, and you immediately associate that with an attack on you yourself personally. This question of identity is so deep. So another identity question that really permeates our culture in terms of identity language is the LGBTQ movement. And how that relates to this generation's understanding of if, for example, the church has anything critical to say about that movement or aspects of gender theory or whatever it is in a conversation about those things, it's seen as mean-spirited, as phobic, as kind of the hyphenated phobic word. So what do you think about that? Like, how does that relate to, again, the church's outreach to this generation and relating to those questions?
Yeah, I wouldn't, unless I'm in a really close relationship with people who struggle with that sense of identity, where I would go back to is to really focus on identity as being beloved son or daughter of God. And I'm very particular, not even child, but as beloved son or daughter of God. I had a very profound experience when I was in the seminary, about 6 months into my seminary formation. And I'm in second semester. And I'm really struggling with, is this real? Am I doing this correctly, God? Am I really in relationship with you? This kind of, not a crisis of faith, but a question of faith that started coming up in my own prayer. I was practicing prayer every day. I was in the quiet of the chapel, completing my holy hours. And one of the things that led me into my prayer was Lectio Divina. That's why I'm a huge proponent of Lectio Divina to anybody, because you take the word of God and you really hear what God has to say to you in that moment. And the practice that my spiritual director gave me was pray through the upcoming Sunday gospel. That upcoming Sunday was the baptism of the Lord.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
And I think I have this correct. In Luke's gospel, the Father says to Christ, "This is my beloved Son with whom I'm well pleased." And so as I think we were in the year of Luke, and I was hearing, and I was saying, "This is my beloved Son, this is my beloved Son." And then my prayer shifted and I would hear, "You are my beloved Son." And I look back at the scripture and it goes, "No, it says this." But I think it's Matthew's gospel that says, "You are my beloved Son."
Okay.
But in my prayer, like I was struggling in that holy hour between "This is my beloved Son" and "You are my beloved Son," and realizing that what the Holy Spirit was trying to get to was me, Christopher, you are a beloved Son. You are my beloved Son with whom I'm well pleased. Well, we were also on retreat with Father Benedict Rochelle.
Oh, my goodness.
So this famous TV EWTN personality, and he did allow, he had sessions with the whole group, but he said if anybody wanted to schedule an appointment, he would meet with us privately for 20, 30 minutes. So I scheduled for one of those, and
Nice.
I was telling him about a little bit of my struggle, but I never told him about the gospel. And he says to me, "This Sunday's gospel is, 'This is my beloved Son.' I want you to change that to 'You are my beloved Son.'" And I just had this this moment of clarity, this affirmation from the Lord saying, "Chris, you're doing this. You're okay. You're doing this all right. And this prayer thing is real." So, that's the story that I like to tell young people about, where I really then began placing my identity and what flows from that. And recognizing that identity. It's actually kind of funny. I call it the Touched by an Angel moment, because if every episode of Touched by an Angel, the angel always said, "God loves you."
That's right.
And tried to make it really personal. And to have to really try to convey that message to young people. That was what I always tried. And then I would say the other issues begin over time. And Pope Francis would say, time is greater than space. That if we can get that foundation, then the other issues are going to resolve themselves and God will work through them over time. But we need to get to that foundational understanding, that identity, that we are beloved sons and daughters of God. So that's how I would work with young people, is to reinforce that. And then the other parts would flow from that.
That's very powerful.
Yeah.
And it also touches on a kind of tangentially related question, which is that the generations need to experience for themselves the realities that we talk about. And you talk about, that's what you say right there. But in your prayer, you experience this yourself, right? Internally, then it's confirmed externally by Father Benedict's words to you, and the deep thirst for that. And so in our church's ministry, outreach, and mission, the need for us to provide context for young people to experience that love is so important. That's why I think retreat ministry is just so essential.
Retreat ministry, and I would say where it started for me, I did confirmation prep as a junior in high school. We did Life in the Spirit seminar as part of that prep. My parish was very charismatic. We did the Steubenville youth conferences.
Sure.
And I think those are, and what's interesting is the moments weren't necessarily at Mass, but I will say they were very Eucharistic because it was usually an adoration. And luckily, I was very blessed to have a parish that really emphasized adoration. And this is the one thing that talking to Catholic universities, because you have a lot of students who are not Catholic attending, because of kind of the pluralism, the multiculturalism that's occurring, inviting everybody to Mass might not be the right thing to do, because that's the most intimate form of prayer that we have. It's the most intimate form of our relationship with God. And then you're asking people, and by the way, the most important thing to do, you can't do. You have to refrain from communion. But what we all can do is we can all go to adoration. We can all participate. You and I have had the conversation about, do we call it First Eucharist or First Holy Communion?
That's right.
And I said, we can all celebrate Eucharist. Every baptized person can celebrate Eucharist.
That's right.
Whether they actually receive, that depends on their communion. There's, you know,
Absolutely.
are they in communion with the church? But we could all celebrate Eucharist. We really can't do that in the Mass because there's such a flow and rhythm, and they're standing up and sitting down in responses that not a lot of people can understand right away. But, you know, if there's a Catholic university out there that has a sports team of a lot of different faith traditions, we can all go into the chapel and pray quietly and have a ritual or a routine to pray quietly together as a team. And what's interesting too is when I was praying regularly holy hours, I noticed an intimacy that was forming with the other guys that were in the chapel with me.
Sure.
Whether we spoke to each other or not, whether we acknowledged each other or not, but
I get that.
There was this mutual respect, because we were doing this at the same time and seeing each other and before the Lord. You know,
Yes.
We had adoration during the year of the Eucharist. That's when the seminary instituted regular adoration more than just weekly, daily. And many of us took advantage of that. And that had a huge change in the community. And so I bring that experience to parishes and try to get staffs to come together and pray adoration together. And, the last parish I worked at, they did holy hours, but they never really did adoration. And we started just with First Fridays. We did it after the 8:30 a.m. Mass, and we went to 8:30 p.m. And I just read a description. This is, I don't know how theologically correct this is, but it's as if adoration fills the church with grace. And so those that don't show up, if they show up the weekend after that First Friday, that room is full of all those graces that came out in adoration, so they start picking up on it. But it's just the idea that something like adoration, where some people might think it's archaic or that's old style, is actually an opportunity in a world that's full of technology and busyness and noise.
That's right.
We can get into that quiet and really, and what I say is go back to that. You are my beloved son. You are my beloved daughter, and allow the Lord to say that to you. To get that sense of identity.
It's powerful, and the healing that can happen in that exchange at levels that we aren't even aware of, that I found in my life and with others who particularly adoration is powerful. And I'm glad one of the things you're bringing in your work here is a love for that and a desire to kind of grow that in our diocese, you know, the cult of Eucharistic adoration.
And it's one of those where no matter what level you're at with it, we can all participate it because it's just the idea of providing the opportunity.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump to another one here, which plays off of something you mentioned earlier with sports, is the word success. Successful. So you say in your fourth characteristic, to be happy is to be successful, and only a person can dictate what can make him or her happy. So talk about that.
Now, notice the word I use, to be happy. Happy is a very fleeting, very temporary, momentary thing that we experience. Where the Christian faith really supports is joy. I think of Mother Teresa when she said, to be joyful is to have joy when there's nothing to be joyful about. To maintain that, and that's where joy is supernatural, where happiness is more of the flesh, you know, human experience. And so young people, I mean, we see, it's not just young people, many generations think happiness is going to come with making a certain amount of money, achieving a certain amount of status, purchasing, consuming a certain amount of toys and gadgets. And so I was very particular in my verbiage there, where happiness is not what we're actually trying to aim for. We're really trying to aim for joy. Again, going back to those kind of practical tendencies of young people. So it needs to be measured. It needs to be scientific proof for, you know, and so success, these measurements of sports, these accolades, degrees, whatever, grades, however you want to define it. And so then a person gets to really choose what makes them happy. But again, to recognize that happiness is going to be very limited. And I would say the opposite when we talk about joy, it's not so much what we choose that makes us joyful, but it's what's given to us. It's a grace from the Holy Spirit to be joyful. And so in a sense, recognizing that God knows better, what's better for me than I know of for myself.
Yes. Absolutely true. And I think the idea that you mentioned in that, which is only a person can dictate what can make him or her happy, the sense that with the fleeting character of happiness, power, pleasure, honor, wealth, those kind of things that people oftentimes associate with the sense of fulfillment or happiness. The radical individualism of our age says, I decide what makes me happy, rather than what we say is, well, actually, you are created for a particular way of being fulfilled, that is universal for all human beings. And actually, you can't unchoose that. You can choose whether or not to pursue that or not. But what Christianity presents to you is a path toward that thing we call joy, which is the kind of lasting, unshakable form of happiness. So that unique. So say something maybe about that the sense that each person has this almost locked in sense that my world and my way of being happy is different than yours. You can't tell me what it means to be happy. So,
right, because happiness being fleeting is more of the human element. And so I get to choose my path to happiness. If we look at joy by its very nature of being outside of ourselves, there are going to be certain things that as humans are going to lead to joy, and there are things that are not going to lead to joy.
Sure.
Now, here, the key to be able to dialogue and to gain somebody's trust in the sense is to recognize that the teachings of the church are not just human teaching, that it's not just from a person who lived in the Middle Ages and doesn't understand a young person in the 21st century. How can they possibly dictate what it means to be happy? And so it's recognizing that there's something transcendental to what the church has to offer, to what the church teaches, the divine revelation about human anthropology and who we are as humans.
Sure.
John Paul II did a lot with this when you think about the theology of the body. And so to demonstrate, to even provide, and I think the where we lack right now is just exposing young people to those ideas, to that, and to try to, how do I put it, to experiment with the teachings of the church. We're seeing celebrities now, Justin Bieber for one, Shia LaBeouf is another one, who began experimenting with letting go of worldly things, namely chastity being the number one. But Shia LaBeouf, when he was preparing for his role as Padre Pio, decided to live a monastic life. And he was taken under the wing of a few monks in the mountains of California. And when he began practicing, the practicing of these teachings, the practice of what would lead to joy,
the ascetical life in the monastery,
he began to realize, okay, there's something about this Catholic faith, and he converted. I mean, I believe Bishop Barron was the one to receive him into the church, but he began realizing the truth behind these practices. And so when it comes to engaging young people, it's like, try it. Try an ascetic life. Try giving things up. Try fasting during Lent and see how that leads you to detach from earthly things. And so it's going to be kind of a flip sometimes, where we sometimes say you need to believe and you need to know the teachings and then practice them. And it's a challenge for me to recognize that sometimes they need to hear the practice first to then understand the belief behind it.
Agreed. Who's the famous actor that was in Hacksaw Ridge and also in the movie Silence? It starts with a G. I'm forgetting his name. Gabriel. I'm embarrassed that I can't remember his name. Regardless, people are fact checking me right now.
Should I do it? I got my phone right here.
Do it. Well, I'll just talk. So this actor was on an episode of, I don't know if it was Stephen Colbert when he was still doing Colbert Report, but anyway. He was being interviewed about his preparing for this movie Silence, which is about Jesuit missionaries in Japan. And he said that one of the things that he was kind of led through in preparing for this movie about kind of playing a Jesuit, was to go through the 30-day exercises.
Are you talking about Andrew Garfield?
Andrew Garfield. See,
Okay.
There's a G in there. I knew it. Just the last name. Yes, Andrew Garfield. So he did the 30-day exercises of Ignatius, and at the end, he said at the end of that experience, he said, I was not brought up a religious person. It just was not part of my background. But during those exercises, I can say that I encountered and developed a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I would never have said anything like that. But it's only because I went through these practices of silence, of fasting, of reading scripture, of meeting with a director regularly to talk through what was happening, of prayer practices. And it changed me. Like, in other words, he didn't think his way into it. He practiced these ascetical practices, this spiritual discipline. So your point, I think, is well taken there.
The one thing a word of caution with celebrities is we cannot understand the pressures that they experience when it comes to, remember that there's a whole culture that is very anti-Catholic, very anti-Christian, that they have to. So if they publicly don't necessarily respond in the way that we might, I
wish they would. Sure.
I worked in parishes where there were some people who weren't happy unless Father talked about abortion every single week. And you just, you can't have parish life and culture and preaching that's focused solely on one topic, as important as it is.
Of course.
And so I sit there and I go, just be careful that not to dismiss or to think that it's an inauthentic experience. And that, again, we have a whole lifetime to work out some of the other details. And so if he had a real authentic experience, I want to go with that, even though his public persona may not represent it.
Sure.
And we're seeing this.
It's a good distinction.
There are some, let me say, loud celebrities who I think venture and they garner some attention and then we see them fall off. But there have been some quiet celebrities that I've seen their transformations over the years. And so we're starting to one that I think took a long time, but Mark Wahlberg seems to be
That's true.
a little bit quieter in his faith journey. It's taken a long time, but I see, I have a deep and profound respect for him because he lives that faith out a little bit more quietly than, say, some of the other ones who have kind of been a little bit more robust with it.
Yeah. So, that's really excellent. Okay, the last characteristic, let's just talk about this a little bit, which is what you might call the ethics of kindness. A successful person is kind, and one does not need religion in order to discover how to be kind. So why do you need religion when it seems like people outside religion are kinder than the ones inside religion? So what's going on there?
I might even change the word, and based on my experience in musicals, Broadway, I love the scene in Into the Woods where the witch says, "You're not good, you're not kind, you're nice." So I might even change it to the word nice.
Good. I like that.
We need to be nice to each other. I love that scene, and that Sondheim really gets into the meaning of words. There's a parody on Sondheim, Into the Words, instead of Into the Woods.
Oh, interesting.
Where people talk about just how many words he uses in his songs and in his shows. But yeah, this idea that we don't need religion to be moral. I remember a friend of mine, it was the meme with Gene Wilder as the Willy Wonka, and says, "Tell me why I need religion to know that murder is wrong." It was something along the sentiment, something along those lines. And I said, well, yeah, you don't need religion to know that murder is wrong. In fact, the 10 Commandments are pretty much natural law. If you think about it, they're divinely revealed, but we can pretty much prove them through natural law, through reason. You don't need faith to understand that murder is wrong, that lying is wrong, that, maybe the keep holy the Lord's Day, but to honor your mother and father. But I do need faith. I do need a religion to teach me to love my enemies. And what I'm seeing is you have all these kind people who will do kind things or nice things to people who reciprocate. But what happens when it's an enemy? What happens? Can you return kindness to somebody who has told you off? Can you return kindness to somebody that is suing you?
Right,
Can
sure,
you do?
sure.
Can you be nice?
point.
Can you be kind to somebody who is your enemy? And I think that, I was in a conversation one time with somebody who was raised Catholic. He was a director of one of my shows when I performed, and we were in an online Facebook, dialogue, let's call it, discussion, argument. And I said, the virtue that is lacking in the world is love for enemies. And he said, where on earth did you get that from? I went, the Bible, because I don't remember that in the Bible. And I'm like, well, let's reread it, and he said he couldn't subscribe to it. He was one of these people that it goes along with the adage, I respect people who respect me. I've actually tried to change that and say, I will respect you despite not having any respect for me. I got to work on it a little bit more, but this idea, and I think that's when we live that radical life of kindness, then people will recognize that, and I sit there and I go, acting in a moment of crisis with such patience, and then acting with heroic values in crisis, people recognize that. And then they'll say, where does that come from? And I can't tell you how many experiences I've had where people are like, how can you possibly be so patient with this person or that situation? And I said, well, my faith dictates that stuff, or that person is coming from a place that's wounded just as much as I was. And that recognizes the dignity and self-value of that person. So there's a lot. And so I think all of these things, when we look at what the Christian understanding of these tenets are, these characteristics are, and we witness to that, it's going to be an attractive lifestyle. People are going to question and going, how is it that he's so patient or she's so patient and I'm not? Even though I claim to be a very good person.
Yes, absolutely. And there's such a beauty to that, by the way. I think we talked before about how Bishop Barron says that one of the ways to approach this nun's generation is not through truth and goodness as much as through beauty. Right? That's kind of the first kind of way of attracting attention. And I think the Christian life, if it's lived out, as you just said, through the ethic of love, that kind of self-sacrificing love, the love that's patient with the difficult neighbor or love's enemy, there's something extremely compelling about that and beautiful in a world where we have it's a culture now based on rivalry and competition and division, hatred, and we see the fruits of that. So when Christians are able to rise above that, but show that it's not just enough to be nice, you have to have something deeper and more robust beneath that in your way of seeing things, and that's one of the things that religion can bring is that robustness.
Well, think about even the act of forgiveness.
Sure,
our society. I always said, the church, nothing is permissible, but everything is forgivable.
Yes.
And in society, everything is permissible and nothing is forgivable. And I sit there, it's counterintuitive to the secular world to forgive somebody, to say, no, I'm no longer going to hold you in debt to that wrong that you committed against me, and I forgive you. Now, I even say, then take reconciliation, where not only are you letting go of the debt, but then offering to reestablish a relationship with somebody. I've run into people who have cut off family members because of some sort of wrong. And I just said, that's not a world that I can live in. I'm so grateful for our virtue of forgiveness and the teaching on reconciliation. I sit there and I go, I could not imagine living in a world without that kind of faith.
Yeah.
And then to be let go of the burden of the guilt, the burden of the revenge or whatever. And again, the beauty of that life speaks volumes to people who are not used to it, who have not grown up with it or haven't experienced that.
Yeah, it really does. Well, there's a lot more I'd like to talk about, and we have about 6 more minutes. But there's one little side thing, and I had noted down a few other issues that you and I have talked about, and one of them is Gen Z and millennials, but especially Gen Z, kind of live online, like their lives are online, their social lives are online, their relationships are kind of digital native world they live in. And so their spirituality is deeply influenced by that. They the social media, it's like, I call it sometimes like a social media communio, right? You enter into communion with others and look for your sense of meaning and spiritual purpose, et cetera, online. So where do you think, the church can meet that generation there in a healthy way?
So first of all, we need to be present online. Because if that's the areopagus of young people, then we need to go in like St. Paul and preach in that areopagus. And we might get the people say, yeah, you can come back. Or this is a hard teaching, kick us out of town. So parishes, and I say parishes because I think we need it at the most local level so that when a person has an interaction with, who are they going to interact with when they enter into a church or when they go to mass or they encounter a parish? So having a good social media presence online, having online, even things that are important are live streaming your masses so that that person who is down the rabbit hole or is searching can kind of understand what they're getting themselves into when they walk into that church by hearing the preaching of the priest or deacon and then getting an experience of the community. So that's one that I think is very important. Two, I think we can nourish online community. I did this when I was in young adult ministry because I needed to reach the young married couples. So we did an online Advent challenge for young couples. And there was so much banter online because it was a little bit of a competition. We were trying to get the top 3 couples to do all these things that had weighted points based on good things for their relationship. Everything from attending mass to, I think one of the daily challenges was write a haiku to each other. And then you post it. It was a Facebook group. When we finally came together, and it was funny because a little technique that I had, Christmas is so busy that we gathered for Epiphany. So the holiday humdrum was done, but we could still celebrate together. And so we gathered together for Epiphany. We had mass, we had a meal, and all these couples who had been interacting online knew each other from their online interactions and had a sense of community already when we finally met in person. And that was fascinating because some of those relationships continued that had started online. Now, I will not say that online is the same as in person.
Of course.
But you can start that sense of community together. Yeah. I look at some of the things that happened during the pandemic when we had these little pods, I think the young people call it tribes, or, they're where we gathered together for something online. And then finally, when we did it in person, it brought us even closer together. So
absolutely.
But then to help young people, so young people are looking for how does a parish community use digital media, how to use technology, but then they want an escape from it. Some of when people talk about, having a weekend away or having an hour without the technology, they love it. So that again, we as a parish, we can use technology to draw people in, but then there's something valuable to say, when you have adoration, turn off your electronics, to have a formation in how to live life, even in increments, without the technology.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
No, that's excellent. And I think the church being able to provide that balance of both the in-person relational things with the online and referencing both. My daughter, Catherine, who's our youngest daughter, she invited me to join Hallow several years ago with some friends of hers. And they had a group, a Hallow group that they, joined together. And what they would do is they would pray whatever we were praying at the time for the season, and then we would share our insights in this little forum together in this closed group, and we did that, and it allowed me to grow closer to my daughter and her friends in that group, right? Because they invited me in, closer to her, and then when I met with her and her friends, that we had been doing this with, it was like, yeah, we knew each other. There was a beautiful depth of familiarity there. So, My experience is definitely as a digital immigrant, as they call us, people who kind of trying to figure out this. I think you're much more native than I am.
Completely.
In the way that you're more. No, you're definitely more, but I appreciate it greatly. Well, this has been wonderful. I
got one thing to say about that too.
Oh, you do? Okay, good.
Yeah, when it comes to, because young people are so, when we even hear the word media influencers, and those that go into social media and say for like a parish, a priest, you're not trying to be the worldwide social media influencer. Not all of us can be Father Michael Schmitz, but there's an importance to the local priest, the local shepherd of his community, to have an online presence that is reachable and attainable.
That's a good point.
So not to be looking at how do I get to the point where I can monetize my social media presence, but how can I have an experience online that is authentic enough that will relate to people so that when they're drawn in, they have a connection to that person already. And it's amazing because so many people have seen me online and then think they have an established relationship with me, and I have to go back and go,
that's a good point.
Ooh, hold on. You don't really know me. Or I don't really know you, but you know me because of this digital presence. So
that's
to
interesting.
be very aware of that young people have substituted the online presence as a real relationship, and to be sensitive to that.
Very good. That's an excellent point. Well, Dr. Christopher, you and I being important media influencers, we have to watch out for this problem. He and I have problems like all the time. People coming up to us everywhere, wherever we go. People are, they recognize us. So, but it's been a pleasure, always a pleasure with you.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait to do it again.
I can't wait. The same thing, very much so. Well, God bless you for joining us again for another edition of Sharing the Faith. It has been a pleasure to be with you. This is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee with our producer, Derek Diamond. Always magnificent, wonderful behind the screen. Until next time, 2 weeks from now, hopefully, we'll join again soon and continue this conversation about our Catholic faith. God bless you until then.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Sharing the Faith podcast. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit ptdiocese.org/sharingthefaith. If you listen to the audio version through an app such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, be sure to rate, review, and comment. If you watched on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe or leave a comment on the episode. Thank you for listening.